Okay, so what I plan to walk through for the time that we have and we're going to share today is that I will walk everyone through the Cloud Collector application. Once the application is shared to a Devo domain, the application is available, and I'll show where to pull it up. And through the Cloud Collector application, we're able to launch collectors, which are unique integrations to go fetch data from various sources. I'll launch the application. I'll show where you can see your running collectors. I will go through and show the collector catalog to show all the various integrations that are available. I will launch a demo collector. I will walk us through keychains where you're able to store your certificates and store secrets. And I will show once a collector is running where you can see the pods, which is the data that shows the status of the collector. So that's what I plan to use the time for. And then I'll leave, so hopefully there'll be enough room for questions, but feel free to like interrupt me. It's supposed to be free flowing. I don't have like slides or anything. Normally product has slides, but I'm going slideless today. So we'll see
No,
how
the
that.
whole point is to be right inside the product. So we're good.
All right, so let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay, wonderful.
Yep.
So once you're in Devo, if the Cloud Collector has been application has been shared with the domain, you will go over to the ribbon, and under applications, you'll see the Cloud Collector application, right? So you click on it. It's already kind of up, so it's here. Once you open up the Cloud Collector application, if you have collectors that are already running, so we have one running in this demo domain, you'll see your collector that is running. You'll see the name you have for the collector. Every collector has a unique ID. You'll see the type of collector that it is, whether it's continuous or scheduled. You'll see the container type. So, for example, you could have an SQS collector and you name it based on the item that you're ingesting. So maybe you're ingesting wait times. I'm making something up. So maybe you name it wait time so you know what you're ingesting. But then you'll see what is the technology that's being ingested. So here you would see like an SQS. So it's really and you'll see more of this container type when I open up the catalog. You'll see the status of the collector. You'll see here it's running. Then if there's any additional information on the collector, you can click on here and you'll see sometimes it'll give you an additional status information. You're able to pause your collector. So if you click here, are you sure do you want to pause the collector? That will stop it from ingesting data. And then if you want, you can also delete the collector. It is also here that you're able to view if the collector has any limits, that you can click these three buttons and also view collector limits. So as soon as you open the Cloud Collector application, any running collectors you have, you'll see this view and you'll see what is currently running on your domain, what is being ingested, the type of data that's being ingested, and you're able to manage whether you pause it or delete it. Pause there to say any questions, thoughts, concerns. Good. Uh, once you're in the cloud, you see your running collectors, that's the first thing you see. One of the things you'll probably want to do is launch a collector. So if you didn't have any collectors running, you would go to your catalog, and here you have all the instances of collectors that you can create, right? So there's a lot of collectors. Again, these are all the these are all the integrations that are available. So like if I have GitHub, I think there's SQS, there's Wiz, Duo. So there's several technologies. And so I'm going to just do demo. So here I can launch and create an instance of the demo collector. Here you'll have what the collector name is, the continuous demo collector. There is no ID. You'll have a description of what the collector is. The collector generates a batch of simple messages to send. You'll have what is the latest version, when it was last updated. So here we can create an instance of the collector. So if I click create an instance of the collector, here you'll see that you get the same information about your collector and some additional tags. You will need to give the collector a name. So test one. You can select which version of the collector you want to have. Right now, I'm just keeping this one, 1.6. Sometimes there's additional options. If there's credentials, you can test your credentials. And we're going to use the default sender for this collector. Looks good. All right, so now I click submit, and it's creating an instance of this collector. Give it a little bit of time. Whew, lovely. While I'm still here, before I go back to the running collectors, and we'll see the test one. Yeah, as you can see here, like I'll take AWS IF. So here we have the AWS Integrations Factory Collector, right? I can create an instance here. I would name my collector. There's multiple versions to choose from. Always recommend go with the latest, but there may be a reason or not to go with the pre-existing version. And here, this is where you would add your collector parameters. So you might have role access that allows us to be able to go fetch the data in our AWS, any other information, the request time and seconds. Some of these are already pre-filled by default values. And if you have any questions about what the parameters should look like, you should check our documentation on collectors for each of these collectors. Is very thorough in terms of what the collector parameters can be and what are the values that they should have and things of that nature.
Yeah, I just have a quick question on this. So we spun up a couple of these AWS collectors in our domain. I would say the first thing that's a little confusing, and this is like nitpicking, but that ID value, we just sort of treat that as just a random integer. What's the purpose of that? Is that really important?
You do need to have a unique ID to identify this instance of the AWS IF. One of the things is that you can have multiple versions, multiple AWS IF collectors running at the same time and going to go fetch data. And so this short unique ID is what differentiate, like if you wanted to differentiate your sources, that's what you would use to do that if you have multiple AWS IFs running at the same time.
Okay, yeah, because typically the pattern for us is we'll just take an existing collector configuration and just copy it over.
Copy it, yeah.
And then just, bump the number once. And that gets a little like confusing, I think. But at the same time, another a feature that'd be really helpful, I think, for this is having kind of like version control or like templates that we can use for existing collectors and be able to push them out. Because another thing that's challenging today is, I don't know who's came in and changed and what they changed in the collector, and I can't track that through version control. So something like a Git type workflow, or being able to put these configs in Git and manage them through a CI/CD pipeline would be really helpful for our use cases.
So two features that are on our roadmap, and one of them is actually going to be released next week, is that we're releasing Audit Trails. The first version will be available internally for operations and for testing, but essentially any changes on the collectors. So if someone launches one, if someone changes a config, that information will be available in a table within Devo. And so we're going through releasing that internally first and then exposing it to customers within your domain. So there'll be a table within your domain, essentially telemetry data will be available. So that will show in terms of when changes happen and tracking those changes. The other feature that is going to be released that's on the roadmap, and that's for early next year, is that we will be doing something called easy config. Essentially, like I said, some of these values are already default values, but unless you have the documentation next to you, sometimes it's hard to understand what I need to fill in, what I don't, kind of what you're describing. So with easy config, things will be more like drop down, pre-filled. It should be easier to understand what is required and what's not, and to fill out, and then we'll get rid of this text box, which I think will be helpful for in terms of launching things very quickly.
Yeah, I would say specifically on like the AWS SQS collector, that thing's pretty complex, and there's a lot of functionality there, and I personally don't find the documentation to be very helpful. It's like I really have to read that documentation to understand what to do. And so it would be nice if there were kind of pre-built templates out there for common use cases. And like for us, our main use case is taking AWS service data that's typically in JSON or in a JSON array, and like manipulating that in the collector and then sending that into custom tables. And so if there were existing patterns out there for like common collector configurations that we could just reuse as a template and manipulate, that would be helpful. I
Yeah,
think.
so that there is Confluence pages, but those don't help you because they're internal. I
Yeah.
think one of the things I think Juan you have on the schedule is to discuss. I don't own collectors, but is to have a collector deep dive, and we can make sure that we. And you're right, the SQS is probably the most complicated one that we do have. So maybe we can make that part of the deep dive in the
Uh,
future.
I was just
I've
about to
been
say that's how we manage ours is through Confluence. We once we get a working configuration and it has all the parameters that work for we have many clients. We just save that within Confluence with the title of the collector that it is. That way we have one place we can update it and then it's standard across all our clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think Confluence works. You know, for us, we automate everything where we can, and so Git would be the place. And then the ideal scenario would we would just build a GitHub action to deploy this through an API if that was available, and then no one would ever touch this console. So it'd all be through like change management through GitOps.
Well, so yeah, so the other feature that's also coming out in 2025. So we do it, all this is, we're an API first. So all of this is like we have a management and a runtime API in the background. And so our goal is to make that public customer facing also early 2025. So that will also be available. That's been the thing that our customers asked for to be able to do this more programmatically. And so we are working on making, we want to make sure they're secure. And then some of the API methods we can't expose. So like coming up with like workarounds around that. So we're working through that now, and that should also be released. Our goal is to release that in Q1.
Cool, good deal. But yeah, overall, this has been super helpful for us for getting teams onboarded and new sources onboarded. So we really appreciate all the work that's done here.
Yeah. Then for a future deep dive, I've been investigating if we can walk through configuring AWS SQS Collector live on screen, but that's in progress. So hopefully I'll get some news on that if we can do that in one of these months and show it off.
Yeah, and it wasn't by accident that I chose this one as the next example. I'm not going to launch it because I don't have any AWS credentials to share here. One of the things I also did want to mention for the AWS collector, for the AWS IF collector for secrets and roles, as you see here, there's a feature for environmental variables. You're able to store them in environmental variables. This is not true for all our collectors. Again, these are all kind of like unique configurations. We are working on a release that will come out in 2 weeks that will allow us to use environmental variables across all our collectors. So that way you'll be able to not have to all your secrets and I'll walk through the keychains will be stored in keychains and you'll just be able to reference them here without them showing up on the screen.
And do you have an example of that syntax? Because I played around with it for like 2 minutes. I couldn't quite figure it out, so I got frustrated and moved on. But can you show?
Yeah, I can show it's in docs. I can provide a link that one can share with the community.
Cool.
But again, it won't work for all collectors until for another 2 weeks. There was just essentially it was a bug, and it only worked for the AWS IF collector, but we've resolved it and it should work for all collectors in the coming weeks. Okay, so yes. So okay, so then once your collector has been launched, we create an instance of the collector. We go back to running collectors, we'll see that we do have a test collector and a demo collector running. I have 0 of 1 pods running, so that means I probably messed up the configuration. So give me a second. Oh, I need a UUID. Give me a second. I'm just gonna do this because I don't want to. Parameters. Oh, did I copy it wrong? One second. Oh. We're gonna have to change a few things to make this work so it's unique. Um, that's a folder. Oh, it changes. Give it a second. All right. All right, great. It's running. So yeah, I had a bad config. You know, um, okay, so now you see that we have test one that is running. So that collector is now running. I had a bad config, so it's 0 1 pods were running. Let me take a quick step back, just so everyone, maybe I'm making an assumption here, so let me just take a step back. So the underlying technology here is Kubernetes, right? So we have these containers, which is these applications, that those are the things in the catalog, the collectors that we go launch. They run on Kubernetes. So essentially, that's the underlying infrastructure. So for once we launch a collector, it builds infrastructure to go and start to compute and go fetch data. Those run on what we call pods. And so depending on, for example, an SQS collector, you may have a large queue that needs to be processed. So you may need more than one pod. And so maybe when you launch a collector, you need to have more than one pod. For the demo, you only need one pod. So that's what I reference when I say pods. I realized I made an assumption here talking about the underlying terminology. Okay, so now that I have my collector running, test one, so I can click into my collector. I can see what version I have running. I can actually change the version.
Are you sharing your screen? Because I think we might have lost it.
Am I not sharing?
No, you are.
I see it. I can see it.
It's so weird.
I can see it also.
I lost it for some reason. It's strange.
Is it?
Should I stop and reshare? Maybe that might help.
I think it's back now. That was weird.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, so I clicked on the collector that I had launched. I see that it's running. I see that the date that it was created. There's the unique collector ID. I can actually switch. If there was another version, I could actually just update my collector. I go to target pods. I have one of one running. Great. That's great to know. Here, if I need to change parameters, this is just a demo. So it's just sending a message. I can change how often it sends a message and where it sends it. Ooh, and what Devo tag it is. There's no environmental variables. So now here it is. This is the other piece here is the collector pods. So remember, this is the underlying technology. The underlying technology here is Kubernetes. So I launch a collector, it launches pods in order to execute on the application, which is a collector. So here I have a pod ID, I have the image, the status, it has the collector been restarted, and when the pod was created. If I want to see more details about the pod, I will click this little eye and I can view the logs. The logs will give me detailed information about what is happening on within the pod, what is happening in the application. So this one is just sending a message. And so yeah, it just says it sent message one. When it started the message, it waited, it sent a stat, waited, sent a stat, which is exactly what the demo is supposed to do. And so if you have more complicated collector, you'll have more complicated log messages. You're able to copy the log messages and store them someplace else if you want more detailed information about what's happening in the logs themselves. And then you're able to see it across these different time windows. Pause there to say any questions about, so the way you get to this window again, you have your running collectors, you click on your collector, and you'll see all the various parameters that you can look at. You look at the collector pods, which is the underlying infrastructure that's running. And if you want more details about the pod, you click on the eye.
I'd asked this in the chat, but are these logs the same as the collectors.out table?
As the what table? Sorry.
Collectors.out.
Collectors.out. I'm not sure. I have to double check. I have to go look at that table.
Yeah, because usually our troubleshooting workflow is we'll usually enable debug in the pod config, and then we just pivot into the collectors.out table to see all the logs associated with it.
Then it probably is. I have to go look at that table to just double check. Okay.
Any other questions so far? Or are we good?
All right, awesome.
All right.
The other thing so we talked through running collectors, we talked through going to the details of a collector. We clicked on creating an instance. The last piece is the keychains. So here, this is where you can create a keychain and also in the future be able to create environmental variables. We have the default sender. One of the things about the default sender is for all other keychains, you're able to edit or delete. For the default sender, you can only delete as the cert expires. So when the cert starts to expire, you'll get a warning symbol, and then you'll be asked to click on the warning and update your cert. If you make a mistake, we have a feature that we're putting out in terms of being able to update the cert at any point in time. We just see going through that, building out that feature right now. If you have an issue with your cert now, you have to put in a support ticket. But any of the other certificates or keychains you can edit or delete. To create a keychain, you would click on the create a keychain button. You would name the chain. There's already a test 1. I'll call this one test 2. We'll make it a general. And here you would add the key values. So what is the key name and what is the key value? This is the same place where if you wanted to create an environmental variable, you would name it. So you could say AWS role. We just are not allowed to do that. Just do that. And then I would enter the value. Maybe let's make something up. And then I can create the key. And so then when, now that it's a general key, oh, wait, sorry. Yep. And so then I can go back. If you remember within the catalog, and I'll use the demo just so I don't break anything. And because this is production, so engineering will be very annoyed with me. I can go click create I can click create environmental variables. I can pull my environmental variable for the keychain. The thing that I am going to replace is, I don't know, messages, making this up. And then I can select one of the keychains that I had already saved. So AWS and AWS role. So then when referencing messages, it'll reference this keychain and this AWS role and this value. It's not going to work right now. Like I said, that's what's coming out in 2 weeks that it works around all collectors. It does work for the AWS IF collector. And so that's how you would store additional keys or secrets within our keychain. Those get stored with Vault. So that's like the underlying technology there. And then for the default, that is your sender certificate. Working on maybe providing it the ability for customers to update it on the fly. As of right now, you get a warning when it starts to expire, and then you're able to update it. Anything in between that, you would just need to put in a support ticket with Devo. So what we covered is running collectors, being able to see them, click into the collectors and get more details about what's running and click on your pods. Within the catalog, you can launch an instance of your collectors. We gave an example of launching it with the demo collector. We also saw, me make a mistake with the configs and it not running. So you also saw what 0 of 1 looks like in terms of the statuses of the collectors. I did forget to mention this. When you pause a collector, essentially you kill the pod in the background. So pausing and playing a collector is essentially restarting the entire process. So essentially when you pause a collector, think about this way. You have Word work on your machine. Word is operating. Pausing the pod is essentially you shutting down your computer. So Word naturally shuts down. When you turn on your computer, Word automatically restarts as part of the startup. So that's the one way to think about pausing and playing collectors. Here's the delete button where you can delete a collector. I'm gonna actually do this. I'm gonna pause this one. Collector was successfully paused, and then I'm just gonna delete it. And it's gone. I like to keep the demo running because I like to when I open up a demo, I like to have that be the first thing there. And also it gives me a default config in case I mess up while trying to do it live, as you saw. So launching the collectors, and then I walked through keychains where I showed what launching a test keychain, and in the future, how you would be able to leverage that in order to be able to store environmental variables. So I'll pause there and ask if there's any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns. And I explained some of the things coming in the roadmap. So expect to see easy config. In the future, we are working on releasing our APIs, so they're customer facing. So that's something to look forward to. I talked about this updating the cert as well. I don't know if there was anything else I missed. Oh, and Audit Trail. So that's available internally, but those will be in tables in your domains in the coming weeks as well. That is a feature we're going to release next week on Wednesday internally, and then we'll do a release, customer release in 2 weeks after that. So that you can look forward to that. And so you'll be able to see if anyone makes any changes to your collectors or your configs, who was the last person to make any changes or updates. That will be stored within a table within Devo.
Are there any planned, I guess, Exchange active boards for viewing the audit logs?
No, but that is something we can talk to. I can talk to Elsa, who's the active board, and Miguel, who are the active board PMs. So that's something we can talk about if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think there's I think there's like a collector monitoring active board out there now, so that might be a good place to pipe in the audit log data to.
Yeah, we'll bring it up.
Yeah. Great suggestion.
Great. Anybody else has any questions? Okay. Before anyone leaves, I'm gonna launch this little survey and see what people think of what we want to cover for the next session. Let me know if everybody got it. I think it's there. There we go. It works. Cool. And then Benson, I can share my last slides and then we can send people home.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. This is sometimes product lives in their little silo bubbles and gets only has a handful of opportunities to talk to and engage with the community and customers. So this feedback is always valuable. It helps us improve the product, understand how use cases. So besides me sharing, I also this is also beneficial for me in terms of receiving. So thank you for participating and listening to me blab.
It was very good. We worked together with the Learning Hub and we released 2 use cases on this topic, one for monitoring ingested data and one for creating an activity alerts. So if you want to know how to do those, you'll find them directly on the homepage banner, and you can click on those and see how to do those. I want to thank everybody for coming and make sure to keep an eye on for the next one.